All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to what would this be? Our fourth Inside Grants, third Inside Grants of the year. Procurement for busy grant teams. If I am feeling the way I do about procurement, you probably feel the same way, and it stresses you out. And so, hopefully, after this hour, you probably won't feel great, but hopefully, you feel a little bit more confident in understanding some things. But I want to welcome everybody here. Tax Day. It's everybody's favorite day, right? Tax Day. Put in the chat, if you don't mind, where are you from? Throw in the chat, where are you from? As I'm doing the intro, and then we'll jump into it. But go ahead, throw in the chat where you are from. A little bit about us at Team DWC. Tennessee. Oh, Jamie, Tennessee. I'm originally from Kentucky, Victoria, okay, got some Tennessee people in here. We were established in 2020 because nothing else is going on in 2020 to help organizations navigate federal grants. Most of our team, the majority of our team, are former feds that were grant managers, OIGs, compliance team leads. All of those things, the people that you probably talk to when you are handling federal grants, that's who's on our team. And when the federal government was recently laying people off, we just hired them. Thought that was a pretty good idea. Hey, some of the best minds are getting laid off of work for no reason, so we hired them. Some of the best grants folks are now on our team. We partnered with 200, since 2020, partnered with 231 nonprofits and 147 federal agencies and have trained over 15,000 unique participants through 850 plus customized sessions. That's all since 2020. A little about me. I am the founder of Team DWC. I work at HHS, the Administration of Community Living, where I was a program officer and compliance team lead. And a lot of those 15,000 people is what I have done. In the past year and a half, we started bringing on a lot more staff. And that's when we decided to really jump into Inside Grants and provide this free kind of training during the lunch hour that you could eat your lunch and also learn a little something. All right, so let's talk a little bit about procurement. Let me see where everybody's from. Puerto Rico. All right. Hey, Gloria from Puerto Rico. Like that. We have on the other side of the world, if you have not been focusing on our territories, Guam and CNMI have absolutely been wrecked with a storm out there, and so if you keep them in your thoughts and prayers, we have our team is going out there in just 3 weeks. We have some contracts out there, so we're going out to Guam and kind of the Northern Mariana Islands, but the typhoon has this wreaked havoc out there, so our team is definitely thinking of them out there. But Puerto Rico, love some Puerto Rico as well, even though it's not the Pacific, but love our territories. So glad you're here. Where does procurement fit into grants? And we're going to talk about where this fits in and what all these things mean. But procurement policies have to comply with 2 CFR 200. And 2 CFR 200 is the uniform guidance. That's the rules we play by when it comes to federal grants, right? And if you are a state, a tribal agency, you still have to, these all apply to you. Now, states, you might have some other ones too, because you got to follow state law. And we're going to talk about the nuances here, but hey, if you get a federal grant, 2 CFR 200 is where you live. Now, prior to a couple years ago, if you were an HHS grantee, you had to follow something else, right? You had to follow something called 45 CFR 75. And now all the new HHS grant awards are saying 2 CFR 200. Finally, right? Because it was just a mirror of each other, basically. But now everybody is following 2 CFR 200. All right. Now, this is if you go to 2 CFR 200, and in the chat box, we're going to put up the link for 2 CFR 200. And when you go to the website, this is what you're going to see, right? This is kind of what you're going to see when you go to 2 CFR 200, the eCFR. This is the only place you should be going. This is the only place you should be going when it comes to looking up the uniform guidance, all right? So, and you're going to see, and we've talked about this in other webinars, if you've been on those with 2 CFR 200, but there's a couple searches up here. You see one at the top left, top right, and right there in the middle, right there in the middle. You don't want to really use those, right? You don't want to use those because those search every CFR in federal government. Every CFR within federal government. So if you type in marketing at the top right or anywhere, it's going to search every CFR. Right? So what you want to do is a control find or a command F, whatever it is, if you're on a Mac or Windows, whatever it is, you just want to be able to search that page. Right? And the link is in the chat right now. And so make sure you save that link, put it in your browser, put it in your favorites. But this is where you need to go. There's a lot of websites that say, hey, this is 2 CFR 200. This is the one that's updated by the federal government. This is the one any Fed is going to be using if they're doing monitoring. So make sure you're using this one, right? Table of contents, also really good. For you to kind of get familiar with the language, where things are. So we're going to have another webinar that really goes through 2 CFR 200 and what's in it later on this year. So if you're interested in digging into the uniform guidance, we're going to have a webinar on that. So let's start. First off, if you are a state or a territory, if you are a state, territory, Indian tribe, right? You follow 2 CFR 200-317 when it comes to procurement. You are allowed to use, right now, if you're a tribal agency, when I know we have some tribal agencies on today, your own procurement policies. The new update said, hey, tribal agencies, go for it, all you. So states and Indian tribes must follow the same policies and procedures they use for procurement with non-federal funds. Right? If those policies do not exist, states and Indian tribes, along with their subrecipients, must follow 2 CFR 200-318 through 327, which is what every non-federal entity that is not a state or a tribal agency does. Right? Now, just because they're using state policy, if you're a state agency, you got to use state policy for procurement. You still have to do some things in 2 CFR 200. It doesn't just give you a blanket, we don't have to follow it because we're following state. You still got to do those at the bottom. Contracting with small business, minority businesses, women business enterprises, veteran-owned businesses. That is a new one. In labor surplus area firms, domestic preferences for procurement, procurement of recovered materials, those two, 322 and 323, are a lot about construction. And then if you put out contracts, Tara, in North Carolina, some other folks I see in here, if you're putting out contracts, there are contract provisions, right, that you got to make sure are in the contracts. This is where people get hung up on audits now. They get hung up on audits here. They don't have the contract provisions in there. So we got to make sure that those are there. Now, again, this is a quick crash course on procurement, right? So we're gonna be going through this stuff. Where usually it takes me a day to get through it. We're gonna go through it in an hour. It's gonna be quick, all right? But you will have these slides. You will have this video at the end, all right? Now, if you're not a state, if you're not a tribal agency, you're gonna be following the uniform guidance for everything, 318, 327. All right, so all the requirements in 2 CFR 200, you also, if you're like a nonprofit, a local laws, state laws, and federal laws, you got to follow all of those. A lot of times people are like, They forget about they got local laws and state laws that they got to comply to. All right, so we're going to go through kind of what this is in just a moment. But we're going to kind of walk through 2 CFR 200, where all the procurement stuff lives. And the next spot we're going to land is 319. And that is competition. Hey, if we're going to put out a bid, RFP for something, people are going to apply for funding that we have. We're a grantee. We're going to need subrecipients or contractors, whatever it is. This is how competition should go. They give us some parameters. They don't tell us exactly how to do it at OMB, the Office of Management Budget, but they give us some rules around it. 319 talks about it. You can't place unreasonable requirements on the firm to qualify. You can't say, hey, you need 100 years of experience. You need 60 years of experience. You can't be doing all that, right? Because then you could just be making it go to one person. The idea here is to open it up as wide as possible for people to apply and get the funding. Requiring unnecessary experience in excessive bonding. Non-competitive price practices. You can't give contracts to consultants on retainer. You're going to have to make sure that there's no organizational conflicts of interest that you have at your agency with whoever you're giving a contract to. So there's going to be some documentation. We're going to talk about that. And any arbitrary action in the procurement process in specifying only a brand name. Those are things that the federal government says, hey, you can't do those things. You cannot have an organizational conflict of interest. If you are married, you can't just give a contract to your husband. What did we see during COVID? We got all these funds, extra funds coming into our agencies. And what the OIG is finding now is there was a lot of contracts self-dealing in a lot of ways. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot is office cleaning. They were giving people would start a brand new office cleaning business. No, they've never had any clients. And all of a sudden, they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars over 2-3 years to clean an office. I've never cleaned before. And it's just weird that the executive director is married to the person who owns the cleaning company. Right? It's conflict of interest. All right. So if you have questions about conflict of interest, we can definitely support you in understanding and get you some good policies on that. Now, this is probably the part where people are like, oh, yeah, this is what we came for. How do you do procurement? How do you do it? What are the different methods that we can do? Right? We got micro purchases, small purchases, sealed bids, competitive proposals, and non-competitive procurement. This is the one that probably everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know that one, sole sourcing. Oh, yeah, we know that one. That's sole sourcing. All right, let's talk about the one that you're probably going to use the most, and that's a micro purchase. Now, the default threshold is currently set by law at $10,000. Okay? One item, $10,000 or less, you can buy that with micro purchase. Now, it can be less than $10,000. So let's say, hey, your board of directors, your agency just says, hey, $10,000 is a lot. We're kind of a smaller agency. We need to have a little bit. We want to set it at 5. You are more than welcome to do that. But if you just follow 2 CFR 200, you have to, it can't be more than 10,000, except in a scenario I'm about to tell you about. Right? You need to make sure your SOPs, if you haven't updated your SOPs in the past couple of years, you need to make sure, just because 2 CFR 200 says it, you got to make sure your own internal SOPs are also up to this limit. Now, you cannot exceed $10,000, except as described in 320, where it talks about it can go up to $50,000. $50,000 for one item. Right? And it talks about it's got to meet this certain criteria. And that certain criteria is in 2 CFR 200 520. 2 CFR 200 520 gives us two things. Right? You got to be a low risk auditee. right? So 2 CFR 200-520 says you got to be a low risk auditee. What does that mean? It's defined in 2 CFR 200-520. Okay, and you have to have an annual internal institutional risk assessment to identify, mitigate, and manage financial risk. So it can go up to 50,000. Now you got to every year, right? You have to kind of self-certify that you meet the requirements, but you can go up to $50,000. Why did the federal government do this? Right, they want to not be procurement, not to get in the way of you doing the good work you're doing. Okay. Now, to do micro purchase and to purchase things, you need to have an approximate cost in advance before you kind of make a purchase. You kind of need to know how it is. You need to look at advertisement. You can research on the internet. Hey, what did this cost typically before? Obviously, things are costing a little bit more now because gas is costing more, right? So since it's not gas, everything costs more because how does it get to the store? You got to get gas, right? So everything's going to start to creep up a little bit. All right. You can also have non-binding estimates as well. All right. Now, could a Fed come in and say, hey, how did you get this cost? You're going to need to have something written down if it's something abnormal. But if it's like paper or whatnot, yeah, we can kind of figure out what paper typically costs, right? One of the things with micro purchases, if you're buying paper and pens and whatnot, don't buy them all at the same place every time. You need to switch up where you buy it from. Maybe you buy it from Amazon. Next time you buy it from Staples. Next time you buy it from Office Depot. Maybe Walmart, Target, wherever. Target maybe not the good one. It might be a little bit more expensive at Target, but you know what I mean. Right, you gotta move it around a little bit. Gotta move it around. Now, small purchase. So for procurements higher than micro purchase threshold, up to $250,000. The FAR, F-A-R, sets this limit. They haven't changed it in a while. Currently, it's at 250. Right, you don't have to have any public solicitation. But you do have to obtain price or rate quotes from an adequate number of qualified sources. What's adequate number? 3. You'll get away with 3 to 5, right? If you have 3 to 5, you're going to be good. Now, you do need to document source selection and award decisions. So you need to, how did you get this? What was your price or rate quote? How did you know that this was a reasonable price, right? As we talk about the cost principles, we're thinking about things of, hey, this has got to be a reasonable price. How do we do that? We need to document it. We need to put it with the file as we purchase it, right? When it comes in. So if a Fed comes in and said, hey, an auditor comes in, hey, we want to know information about this purchase. It's all there. It shouldn't take you very long to get that information. Also, you don't have to go with the lowest bid every time. Okay, I want to remind you don't have to go with the lowest bid, but if you don't go with the lowest bid, you definitely need to be able to articulate why you did not. What's the reason? Hey, we need a piece of assistive technology for somebody getting to start a job, right? Yes, the lowest one wasn't going to be available for 3 months, but this person was starting a job in 2 weeks, and this one will come next week. So that's the one we use. And yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but this person needs a job. Right, we can't wait because that job might not be there when this other piece of assistive technology comes in, right? That's a reasonable explanation. Sealed bids, right? Sealed bids are typically used for construction, right? They must be publicly solicited for a firm fixed price contract. It's awarded to the responsible bidder whose bid is the lowest in price. You open them all up at the same time. Any specifications must be defined in advance. Basically, you're telling them everything you got to do, and they're just giving you a price. Make sure it is advertised publicly. And you can't just say, hey, it's due tomorrow. Give it 2 weeks, right? Maybe if it's an emergency, you give it a week, but it needs to be open where people can actually price this stuff out. Again, the federal government is very big on getting it out to the masses, right? Getting it out to the masses, making sure many people know about it. So make sure that you are definitely putting it out there. Take screenshots of your website or copies of, if it's in the newspaper, whatever it is, to kind of prove that it was definitely made public and it was advertised out there. All right. What does the sealed bid process look like? You're going to advertise the invitation for bid. You're going to put it in the newspaper. You're going to put it on your website. You're going to put it on somewhere else. Who knows? You're going to put a radio ad out. I don't know. Right? You're going to open the bids publicly. Right? So, hey, here's a spot. You're going to have people sign that they saw them open, especially internally, but hey, it's open to the public. You do it. Determine a responsive and responsible bidder with the lowest bid. Then you're going to execute a contract, and then you're going to manage the contract, and you're going to close out the contract. Okay? Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We're going to talk about contracts and some things that need to be in a contract in a minute. But again, make sure if you're doing construction, this is kind of the preferred method for construction. For everything else, that doesn't really work for that. What works for, if it's not construction, competitive proposals. How many of you all, I'd assume most of you have probably applied for a grant with the federal government. That's why you're here, right? And they put out an RFP. And the next time you see an RFP, I want you to pull it out, because basically what the federal government is saying is the elements that we have in the RFP, when they put it out, that's what they want you to have as well, right? You need to put out a request for proposals, sometimes a request for quotes. You got to put in your RFP, hey, what are you looking to have done? And what are the requirements? You need to have a written method for how you're going to evaluate any proposals that come in. How are you going to select a proposal? So that could mean how much things are weighted, what the point scale is on each evaluation factor. Right? And the selection needs to be based on the most advantageous offer with price and other factors considered, right? The best value trade-off, you see here. But that needs to be all lined out in your RFP. And after you make a determination, you award a contract, make sure you put in your documentations. It's all about documentation. You want to make sure that there is something documented in writing. It doesn't need to be very long, maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs max of why you made the decision you did. I have seen people put in all the proposals and all of the factors and their comments as kind of backup. That works too, if you want to do it that way. But you don't have to. Theoretically, the government's only looking for a paragraph, 2 paragraphs. Hey, well, why did you make this selection? Okay? What does this process look like? First thing you're going to do if you're going to go through an RFP, you're going to develop a statement of work. Well, what do you want somebody to do? Don't put out an RFP and you don't know what you want them to do. What is the end goal? What do you want them to be able to accomplish? Then you're going to put out the RFP, making sure that you are following what is into CFR 200 and what has to be in that. You're going to put it out, just like you did on the sealed bids. Put it out to the masses. Put it out in the newspaper. Put it out on your website. Put it out everywhere, right? Make sure that there's, one of the things I used to tell people to do, who would be people that would, if you really wanted to be safe, who would be some people that potentially would bid on this? Just email it to them directly. Hey, just want to let you know this is out here, right? Email it out 5, 10 people, agencies, right? As well, on top of that, then you're going to be good to go. Not only did you put it out on a website, you also pushed it out to adequate number of people directly. Once those proposals are completed and they come in, you're going to evaluate the proposals, and you're going to evaluate it based on the evaluation criteria that you set in the RFP. You cannot deviate from that. And then once you make your decision, you're going to award the contract. That's what you're going to do. All right. That is, at a very high level, the competitive proposal process. Now, there's another process, sole sourcing. And boy, do we love some sole sourcing. And boy, does the OIG and compliance folks, do we hate it. This is where the fraud happens. A good amount of fraud happens with sole sourcing. Not every sole sourcing is fraud. Let me be very clear. But a lot of it does happen here. This needs to be a last-ditch effort. Like, this is something that will get flagged every time for review. All right? So just know, if you do sole sourcing, it's getting reviewed. You better be prepared. Right? Non-competitive procurement, known as sole sourcing, can be awarded if one or more of the following circumstances apply. The aggregate dollar amount does not exceed the micro purchase threshold, which is $10,000, right? Can go up to $50,000, but it's $10,000. The item is available from only a single source. Folks, that is not typically going to be something that is normal in today's day and age, right? There are a lot of people out there doing a lot of work. Typically, there's not only one person in a single field. Sometimes, yes, but not typically. There is an emergency requirement that will not permit a delay resulting from a competitive solicitation. Right? I have a feeling our folks in Guam and CNMI, after the typhoon, they'll probably have some sole sourcing stuff come out. The federal agency authorizes a non-competitive procurement in response to a written request. If this is what we'll be telling our folks in Guam and CNMI, hey, get it in writing from the feds, which they move on this pretty quickly. Hey, we want to do this. This is why. We don't have time. Okay, go for it. And after solicitation of a number of sources, competition is determined to be inadequate. They just don't have the ability to do it and get the results that you need. One of the things that you can do to prevent having to sole source is having a predetermined number of vendors. You can do a sole sourcing, so in blue sky days, like it is here today in North Carolina, right? Put out an RFP about that you need some work done, and you can have a contractor list of folks that are pre-approved that you can work from. That will help get around the sole sourcing, right? Maybe it's up to, this pre-award goes up to $50,000 per vendor before you got to put it out, right? But that at least gets the work done quickly, right? You can do some work and then you can put out an RFP and you got $50,000 to spend before you got to make an actual award, right? So there's some ways around doing sole source, but you got to think about it ahead of time. What could be your justification? What it needs to be in your justification if you're going to do a sole source. A brief description of the project and or the product service being procured, including the expected procurement amount. Why is it necessary to contract non-competitively? This will be looked at very closely. So make sure if you're going to do it, you are doing it, you're making a heck of a case, right? A description of and the results of any market survey or research conducted to help determine whether a full and open competition consistent with applicable laws could be conducted. And non-competitive procurement is prohibited unless authorized by Department of Ed. That was for some of the education folks in here. That is a Department of Ed specific requirement, right? School systems, whatnot, we have some in here today. Non-competitive sole sourcing is prohibited unless you get it in writing, right? There's some other agencies out there, but Department of Ed is big on, hey, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can, though, if you get it in writing from us beforehand, that doesn't typically happen, though. All right, that typically does not happen. Next couple things, these are if you're doing construction, domestic preference, and procurement. 322, I'm going to kind of fly through these. Again, these are construction. Hey, any materials or goods. There's a lot of if you have questions about this, there's some good FAQs and some materials around this to make sure that you have some information. Procurement of recovered materials. Right? This is one of those things I said, hey, even if you're a state, a tribal agency, you still got to follow this, right? You got to comply with Solid Waste Disposal Act. If you're just a AAA or a Center for Independent Living, a school district, a SEA or LEA or whatever type of agency, more than likely 322 and 323 are not going to apply to you. You don't need to really worry about them. But if you're doing construction, they definitely will apply. Okay? Federal agency or pass-through into review is 2 CFR 325. When it comes to procurement, the federal agency asks for information from you or the subrecipient. You have to make it available. The technical specification or proposed procurements where they think, hey, there's some questions here. You got to make those materials available. Now, when we're doing procurement, maybe an RFP, we're doing a contract, maybe a subrecipient agreement. What is the difference between a contractor and a subrecipient? Well, I'm going to give you some high-level things. If you're probably here, you probably understand the difference between a 1099, W-4, right? You know, somebody's how you pay them. Do you pay taxes out? Are they an employee or are they a contractor? The IRS, right? They have some specific requirements, a test that will help you determine if somebody's an employee or a 1099 contractor. Well, 2 CFR 200 has something similar, but not as detailed, right? But they give us some hints on how you can determine. A subrecipient, right? When you're looking at what this subrecipient or contractor, this partner that you're going to give some money to, how we define them, if they're as a subrecipient or a contractor, if they determine who is eligible to participate in a federal program, that is a key sign that they might be a subrecipient. They're going to have performance measured against whether the objectives of the federal program are met. Probably a subrecipient. They're responsible for programmatic decision-making. We're ticking towards subrecipient pretty clearly. They're responsible for complying with federal program requirements. Okay. And they use federal funds to carry out a program that the federal government said, hey, this is important. And this is a program, right? This is a program in the community that we want to put federal funds to make a difference. If they are using the money you're giving them to do that, they are more likely subrecipient. Now, if you are an IT provider, right, they are probably going to be, in most instances, a contractor, right? They provide goods and services within normal business operations. They provide similar goods and services to many different purchasers. So our company, right, we provide goods and services through a normal business operation. We have a ton of clients. We operate in a competitive environment, right? We're not subject to compliance requirements of the federal program as a result of the agreement we have. We are a contractor, not a subrecipient. And that does matter, right? The subrecipient agreement, contractor's contract, those are two different things, right? And the requirements that go into those. So you want to make sure you know, is it a subrecipient or a contractor? 2 CFR 200 330A, right? Is where we want to go. All right. Conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest here. Let's keep talking about conflicts of interest. I see a question in the chat. Let me come back to that if you do not mind. I will come back and hire. You can put any question in at the end. I'll answer that. The officers or employees and agents of the non-federal entity may neither solicit nor accept gratuitous favors or anything of monetary value from contractors or parties to some contracts. Right? One of the things you could do is say, hey, we have a limit, $10 limit per year on gifts that you can accept. Okay, that's one thing you could do. You got to have a conflict of interest policy that reflects whatever federal agency you work with. They're going to have a conflict of interest policy, and your policy needs to mirror theirs, and it also needs to have ways to contact the federal agency if there is a conflict of interest identified. You got to be able to tell them how you're going to mitigate it and what it was around. The federal government does not play when it comes to conflicts of interest. All right, I'm telling you, you're going to start seeing a lot more stuff when it comes to conflicts of interest, because this is an area where there's a lot of fraud. We're giving money to people who live with us. We're giving money to people in our family. If you're going to, let's say in your rural part of Kentucky or Tennessee or anywhere, and there's just not a lot of people, maybe you're in a CNMI, right? And you feel like everybody's related to everybody somehow, right? My Puerto Rico people probably feel the same way. You know everybody, and there's a lot of family ties everywhere. We're seeing this where we're at right now in Guam and CNMI, a lot of conflicts of interest. You have to have a way to mitigate this. All right, you got to have a policy and procedure to mitigate this. Follow your policy. So follow your policy. We could spend all day talking about conflicts of interest, but I will not bore you with that. I will not bore you with that. Now, one of the things we talked about at the very beginning was 321. Okay, 321. And 321 says contracting with small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women business enterprises, veteran-owned businesses, and labor surplus area firms. How do you do this? Well, you have to. The federal government says, "Hey, we'll give you some ideas on how you should do this and how we want you to prove that you did this." Right? First off, you need to do some work. You don't have to identify every firm, but you need to be able to have a list of qualified firms. So you can get an Excel spreadsheet. One tab is small businesses, one is minority businesses, one is women business enterprises, veteran-owned businesses. What's the name of the business? What kind of work do they do? Yeah, so that's what you want to make sure you're doing. You need to have that list. And so when you have an RFP goes out, you're making sure you are sending out a solicitation list for that, okay? Making sure you're sending out a solicitation for that. When there are potential sources, you're emailing them, you're making sure. They are very big. Even this administration, they haven't pulled this back. I know, crazy. Contract small business, minority businesses, women business enterprises, veteran-owned businesses, making sure that they have a chance to take part of whatever you are putting out. If it's a massive RFP, can you divide that solicitation into smaller tasks? So more small businesses, more women-owned businesses, more veteran-owned businesses, they can get involved. You want to establish delivery schedules to encourage participation. What does this mean? What we have seen in the past was you would want the work done in 2 weeks when it really didn't need to be done for 8 weeks, right? When there was only one business that could do 2 weeks, right? So you're kind of, pushing the cards to all one business. They don't want that, okay? There are the Minority Business Development Agency, MBDA, and the SBA. They all have services to help with staying in compliance with this. And you got to make sure you require prime contractors to take affirmative steps. Contracts, you're going to do a contract. There are provisions in 327, 12 of them that you have to have in them, all right, that you have to have in there. And they vary by contract amount or type. So I would go and look at 327, 2 CFR 2 CFR 200, 327, and monitor what those are. Now, we have a list. You'll get this slide deck via email. Right, the SAT, Simplified Acquisition Threshold. We talked about it earlier. It's $250,000. All right, so if you see SAT, it's $250,000. Some of you are having PTSD thinking you got to go take an SAT. You do not. Simplified Acquisition Threshold. Okay, these are all the different provisions that must be in a contract. Okay, when I am or our team is working with agencies that just had a single audit, this is almost always in there because people don't put in the right contract provisions. All right, so you will get these again. Some of them, it doesn't matter what type it is or how much. There's got to be a provision in there for it. Okay. So make sure you're looking at that. Here's another one that usually wraps people up. They do not go to sam.gov and look at the excluded parties list system and see if they are suspended or debarred from receiving federal funds, meaning the agency that they want to contract with. How do you prove you did this? Well, do a screenshot. Do a screenshot and show that, hey, we did this. This is the date. Sign it off. That's all you need as proof. But this should be a step in your procurement system that you use. All right. Hey, one of the last steps, we're going to make sure they're not debarred or suspended. I know some agencies that do the debarment suspension before they even start grading the RFPs. That's step one they do, right? Because they don't want to get down too far. They want to award something and then they're debarred. So they do this up front with everybody that applies. Now, if you get hit with an audit finding on this, that you didn't do this, typically you don't have to give back money unless they were debarred or suspended. Typically, you're just going to have a corrective action that says, this is our plan moving forward so it doesn't happen again. And then you got to go back and prove that they were not debarred or suspended. All right, so make sure you are following this one. Some common mistakes in procurement. Some of these you have probably seen or heard of or happened to you, right? Not including all the required contract clauses we just talked about, right? Not making and documenting efforts, right? And affirmative steps that are described in 321. Documentation is typically the biggest audit finding. Almost everything goes back to audit findings is around documentation, right? Awarding a cost plus percentage of contract. That's a big thing in construction. Not documenting all the steps of your procurement action. And you should be able to demonstrate through documentation what actions you took, why a choice was reasonable. Now remember, you think you're going to be there for the rest of your life, but you never know what's going to happen. And so if you work at an agency, you probably care deeply about their mission. And the best thing you can do is document. Because if you're not there, you win the lottery, something happens to you, you get a new job somewhere. If there's no documentation, how do you prove there was good intent? You got to be able to explain. Somebody has to be able to pick up that piece of paper and say, this is why they made that decision. Make sure that is there if you care about your agency. All right. Now, how do we balance compliance and efficiency? Right? Make sure just because you can go up to $10,000, maybe that's not good for your agency. Maybe $50,000 isn't good for your agency. Make something, the procurement method, make it work for you so you don't have audit findings, reduce risk as much as possible. Make sure you have templates. If you need help with templates or checklists that you do every time. When I was a Fed, we had a checklist for how we looked at everything. Prior approvals, how we looked at the annual reports. We had a checklist for every agency. I love a good checklist. I love a good flow chart. Have those. Have a template that you use something every time. So everybody's doing it the right way every time. In the same way, right? Embed key compliance steps such as a SAM.gov check to make sure they're not debarred or suspended. Make sure we're talking about conflicts of interest with staff at least annually. Make sure you document, you set the requirement for what documentation looks like. Pre-qualified vendors, right? I talked about this a little bit earlier. Pre-qualified vendors, so the sole sourcing doesn't get out of hand. You already pre-qualified them up to a certain amount. And make sure your program, finance, and procurement teams, they all have clear workflows. They talk to each other. Don't work in silos. I went to Texas to a university and HBCU, and they were talking. It was the first time that the grants team and the program teams have been in the same room doing a training together in years. And it showed, because the first day and a half, it was so awkward. And then by the end, they were like, why don't we do this more? Why don't we talk? I always thought that you all were just didn't want to spend money. I didn't realize that there was all these documentation. And so they had no idea of each other's jobs. Talk to each other. Communication, right? For every relationship, you need good communication. So make sure that you are communicating, that you're not working in silos, and that'll be super helpful. Now, let's get to our questions. How about that? All right, let's get to our questions.